Hey guys, Turk here. I hope you're having a good one. Despite a massive show of support with our last video covering the PlayStation 5 Pro, I still see people over on Twitter parroting the talking point that the PS5 Pro is equivalent to an RTX 4070. Some guys have moved the goalposts, others, they just focus on the feature set, and there's still some that claim it's just underclocked. Even then, I keep seeing the RTX 4070 being hurled into the console wars. Us PC gamers have tried our best, and even Digital Foundry themselves have walked back their Nvidia recommendation and have used the RX 6800 in their subsequent videos. But seeing these types of posts get thousands of likes and repeated over and over, and just, I've had enough, guys. It's time to drop some truth bombs and set the record straight. Twitter is wrong. This video revolves around one critical point: the definition and understanding of the term equivalent. As I've explained over on X, equivalent means equal in value, amount, function, meaning, etc. The most pivotal element for us today is function. I've got a couple of practical examples here. Have you ever seen Apollo 13? You know, that Tom Hanks movie that's up in space? There's a critical scene where the astronauts start to run out of oxygen. Now, given that they're in space, they can't just go to Walmart and pick up a replacement, especially for some of the systems that just aren't expected to fail. Through the ingenuity of the engineers back at HQ, they were able to retrofit a new air filter to work, but it looked nothing like the original part. Though the design of the part was drastically different, their function was equivalent. Next, we've got to throw in a car example, you know that, right? Is a Corvette equivalent to a Camaro? Both have four wheels, they have great drives down the boulevard, both are geared towards performance and are a blast to drive. But my community on X and I totally agree they are not equivalent. The Camaro has some features that the Corvette just doesn't have, like V6 engine packages, more seating, larger trunks, and a body style that's more comparable to the Ford Mustang. And the counter is true as well. Corvettes offer many more performance V8 packages, they've got limited seating, they were specifically designed for the track, a more racing-focused design. Though some aspects of the device can be made to function similarly, the devices themselves are just far more different than they are equal. Now that we have a grasp on equivalence, let's look at the definition in a practical sense and talk about the PS5 equivalent GPU, the RX 6700. Here on the channel, I've made this comparison many times in the past, but most of you guys aren't familiar with my coverage. So let's look at the gold standard, Digital Foundry. In their analysis, they used this GPU in a Frankenstein PC build and found that, on average, the RX 6700 performs equivalent to a PlayStation 5. Now let's take this GPU. How does it check out in terms of functional equivalence? Again, on average, the rasterization performance is on point. And on paper, its specs say that it has the same compute units, but it does run a bit faster, consumes more power. We're running completely different versions of games anyway, and it also has some features that the PS5 just doesn't have. However, the similarities outweigh those differences, and ultimately, its performance confirms its functional equivalence. We're armed with a definition, an understanding of that definition, and we've got a certified equivalent GPU for comparisons. Let's finally figure out the PS5 Pro's equivalent GPU. We're going to cover all the different angles with 15 games, and I'm going to be honing in on the PlayStation 5 Pro's big three: the larger GPU, advanced ray tracing, and AI-Driven Upscaling. Let's warm up a bit and start simple and focus on the larger GPU and raw horsepower. Mark Cerny's Pro model claims to have raw rasterization performance improvements of up to 45%. You heard that right, up to. If we take a look at Tech PowerUp's GPU ranking list, there are quite a few GPUs that are worth considering today. Looking around that 40% target mark, we have the RX 6800, the 7700 XT, both versions of the RTX 3070, and the 4060 Ti. Fortunately, I've got access to most of these GPUs today, so I'm going to be putting all of these cards under the microscope today. But let's not leave out the fools on Twitter that are claiming the RTX 4070 is the equivalent GPU. I've had enough, I went ahead and bought it, so I got that one too. Let's put this debate to rest. Let's start with 3D Mark. The RTX 4060 Ti comes in 21% faster than the PS5. The 3070 is about 23% faster, the 6800 is 46% faster, and the RTX 4070 is 60% faster. So on paper, it does sound like that most of these GPUs are on the target for being equivalent GPUs. So let's take a look at real games. One thing that's really difficult when looking at this type of information on YouTube is that many GPU reviews aren't relevant to this conversation. Their test rigs are far faster, they use ultra quality settings, they don't use upscaling most of the time, etc. However, I am not like most reviewers, and my test system closely matches the capability of a console while using console equivalent settings, courtesy of Digital Foundry. So first up, God of War. This isn't Ragnarok, but we see decent GPU scaling from the PS5 equivalent to the RTX 4070 at original quality settings. The 4060 Ti only manages a 7% increase, 23% coming from the 3070 and 45% on the 4070. Hogwarts Legacy's performance mode targets medium quality settings at 1440p. And with our desktop GPUs, scaling continues. 4060 Ti squeezes out 11%, 6800 22%, 3070 comes ahead at 37%, and that 4070 is 43%. Forza Horizon 5, it's as close as we're going to get to GT7 at this point, but impressive results with all of the upgrades today. The 4060 Ti and 3070 have gains in the 30% range, and the 6800 and 4070 swing above the 50% improvement. Cyberpunk's performance mode gives us an exciting twist at 1270p input resolution. Coming from the RX 6700, or the PS5 equivalent GPU, we start seeing a CPU bottleneck from all of the GPUs today, up to 50% with the 4070. And what's weird, as GPU heavy as Red Dead Redemption 2 is, we again see instances of CPU limiting with these higher end GPUs. The 4060 Ti and 3070 scale well, 9 and 25% respectively, but the 6800 and the 4070 come right around the Pro's target of 45%. In the next batch of games, Call of Duty uses dynamic resolution scaling to maintain 60 FPS in its quality mode, so to keep things simple, I'm just going to be sticking to 1440p. Again, excellent scaling with a massive jump up to 55% improvement with the 6800. Starfield is yet another indication of a CPU-limited gameplay as we run around the city of Jemison. Ironically, the 4070 is outpaced by the 4060 Ti. If this game does make its way to PlayStation, the Pro should manage 60 FPS no problem. The Last of Us is interesting. At first glance, we see decent scaling, but as we get to the 3070, we are again hitting CPU bottlenecking. So with an improvement of more than 60% from the 3070, we're effectively maxing out the PlayStation 5 Pro's CPU. Final Fantasy XVI is a unique situation for the Pro, since the PS5 scaled anywhere between 720p and 1080p. And sure enough, the RX 6700 hits that quality and frame rate threshold just shy of 30 FPS. Increasing our horsepower, we see nearly doubling of the FPS, and the 4070 guys almost triples the frame rates. Last up is last month's craze, Black Myth Wukong. The main three contenders today see anywhere between 45 and 53 percentage points increase, while the 4070 screams ahead to a 81% improvement. So let's go back to our definition. Which of these GPUs is functionally equivalent to the up to 45% claim? On the low end, the 4060 Ti comes in just short, only hitting an average of 29%. The RTX 3070 does fare better, coming in at 38%. That's within 7 percentage points of the claim. The RX 6800 still maintains my top spot for recommendation, coming in at a 48% improvement over the RX 6700. As for the 4070, it's still seeing a 60% performance improvement over the PS5 equivalent GPU. That's even considering all the games with CPU bottlenecks. That's over twice the delta compared to the RTX 3070, and it's the same spread as the 4060 Ti. So for now, let's keep all of these GPUs in the mix and shift our gears to ray tracing improvements. As I mentioned in my previous video, Cerny's ray tracing 2 to 3 times improvement claim was about something other than performance. He was speaking to the speed of the ray tracing itself, which is more comparable to a teraflop number. Now, teraflops is difficult for our average Twitter viewer to understand, so let's break it down a bit better. The main talking point is that the PlayStation 5 Pro uses RDNA 4, so anything else isn't equivalent. But you gotta ask yourself, what is unique about RDNA 4? Just like our Corvette example from before, though a V8 engine might be different, there are some V6 engines that can be functionally equivalent, especially when that V8 is handicapped by its driver. So let's test the ray tracing pedigree of all of the different GPUs today. 3D Mark offers robust tools for analyzing ray tracing, so let's look at its feature test. Here, we're forcing our GPUs to render specifically through each design's ray tracing pipeline, bypassing any rasterization components of the hardware. The RX 6800 sees a 59% improvement in RT performance, the 4060 Ti improves by 113%, and the 4070 takes a massive 187% improvement. Taking that at face value, not even the 4070 matches Cerny's performance claims. But hang on a second, guys, let's make more sense of these numbers. Stay with me, it's gonna get a bit weird. Now, if you're not down with doing a little bit of math, skip to this timestamp and we'll talk about performance. But going from the PS5 equivalent GPU to the RX 6800, we gain 67% more compute hardware, though we only improve our performance by 56%. And when we compare with similar data from Guru 3D, it shows that the 7700 XT has fewer compute units than the 6800. Still, its improvements come from the upgrades to RDNA 3, effectively improving performance by 72%. With these figures, we can now make a new figure called performance improvement per ray tracing improvement. Dividing the performance improvement by the ray tracing improvement gives us a 33% efficiency for the RX 6800 and 48% efficiency for the 7700 XT. Surprisingly, this sort of calculation is very similar to my performance per watt claims that I was correct on from years ago. Now, let's apply this to the PS5 Pro's claimed 2 to 3 times speed improvements. We know the ray improvements and we have a range of performance per ray improvements that we could see, so we can calculate the expected performance improvement. On the low end, we could see a 67% performance improvement from the PS5 Pro and a whopping 144% improvement on the high end. Tap the brakes just a second, guys. What does this mean for actual performance? If we plug those improvements into our original ray traced results from 3D Mark, that gives us 30 FPS on the low end and 44 FPS on the high end. That's RT performance that's between the RX 6800 and just shy of an RTX 3080. Guys, you're out of luck if you were still hoping the 4070 would be the equivalent GPU. The 4070 comes in at 51 FPS, which is 16% faster than our highest end measurement. But guys, these synthetic results, they really don't mean anything. How do these cards handle a more gaming synthetic like Port Royal? Port Royal is considered the best synthetic for RT performance, and quite remarkably, most of the GPUs today all fall right in line. The RTX 3070 and 4060 Ti are 49% faster than the PS5, and the 6800 and 7700 XT come in 56 and 68% faster. And the 4070 is 105% faster than the PS5. What that means is, when running a realistic gaming scenario, the 2 to 3 times improvement claimed by Cerny cannot be directly translated to a performance expectation. So you might be skeptical about this point, so let's put all of these findings to the test in real-world gaming scenarios to see how they hold up. Again, I'm looking at console quality settings and resolutions on a console equivalent platform. Metro Exodus Enhanced Edition uses the high quality preset in its benchmark run, and we see excellent scaling across the GPUs. The 4060 Ti sees a 26% improvement, the 3070 with 34%, and the 6800 with 53%, and that 4070 is at 68%. Spider-Man's performance RT mode throws the exact wrench into the system that we were expecting. highlighting CPU limits for all of the included GPUs. Not even the RTX 4070 can squeeze out more than 31% improvement. It's even bested by the 4060 Ti yet again. Curse you, Series S! Control was considered the tip of the spear for RT in console gaming this generation, and even though it played well on the PS5, it's gonna work even better with the PS5 Pro. 33% better performance comes from the 4060 and 6800, but the 3070 takes a massive win here with a 50% improvement. The 4070 is just in a class of its own, 82% faster than the base PS5. Cyberpunk follows Metro's lead with excellent scaling with RT shadows enabled. What's interesting here is that the RTX 3070 manages to achieve that lucrative 60 FPS quality mode. Meanwhile, the 4070 is sitting pretty at 78% improvement. Ratchet & Clank does flip the script, with the RX 6800 coming out ahead of the 3070, managing to hit that 60 FPS quality mode. Should I even mention the 4070 again? Probably not. Considering each of these games, we can paint a clear picture on the averages. The 4060 Ti is about 43% faster than the PS5 equivalent GPU, the 6800 is about 50%, and the 3070 is 52% faster. Meanwhile, the 4070 is 90% faster. To put that all into perspective, all of the other GPUs will have to lower their resolutions below 1440p just to hit 60 FPS consistently, while the 4070 can run almost 1800p in these same scenarios. You guys still don't believe me? Fine, I'm gonna double down. How about we compare Digital Foundry's own hands-on testing with the PS5 Pro and compare their observation to my proposed GPUs? That's gotta settle it, right? Let's start with Ratchet & Clank. Digital Foundry claim an output resolution of 1440p at 60 FPS in their quality RT mode. On the left, we've got the 6800, in the middle is the 3070, and on the right side, the RTX 4070. As we saw in the charts before, the 6800 hits the nail on the head, even while only using FSR for upscaling. Trust me guys, we'll be talking about upscaling soon. How about Hogwarts Legacy? Let's dial in the quality mode settings. High RT quality for improved reflection resolution, along with RT reflections and shadows engaged. At 1440p, the 3070 and 6800 nail that 1440p 60 quality mode, while the RTX 4070 is again CPU limited. Spider-Man, of course, is CPU limited as well, so all of these clips look the same, but here's the issue though. Even the developers didn't change anything from the base game. Here we're running with higher resolutions using the same settings, and all three GPUs hit that Performance Pro target. Now let's put all the chips on the table and drive the point home with F1 2024. Digital Foundry lists the output resolution of 4K, using DDGI, RTAO, and both versions of RT reflections. On the PC, we have to differentiate by resolution this time. The RX 6800 can run performance upscaling mode, the RTX 3070 runs balanced upscaling, and the 4070 can run up to quality scaling mode. Now, this might come to a surprise to some of you, but I do have connections in the industry. I had to call in a favor, but sure enough, Oliver Pixel counted the game for me. Go down in the description and write down what you think he came up with. Have you already made the comment? All right, let's go. Oliver counted 1080p and 1152p. Guys, this is spot on with the 6800 and the RTX 3070. So, with all that data in hand, let's go back to the definition of functional equivalence. Unfortunately, the RTX 4060 Ti was already struggling in rasterization, and RT is about 14% slower than the supposed PS5 Pro, so we've got to take it off the list. The same goes for the RTX 4070, though it does give us a bit of buffer with the raw performance. The PS5 Pro's hands-on data also proves that it's not only 14% faster at ray tracing, but it can process 33% more pixels in RT modes. So that one's out of the loop as well. So that leaves us with the RX 6800 and the RTX 3070. Up to this point, we can objectively determine how fast each of our devices are, but when it comes to AI upsampling, How exactly do we assess equivalence here? I've noticed many people on X still need to understand what upscaling is, so here's a bit of a primer to get us all on the same page. The goal of upscaling is to reduce the amount of time it takes to render a frame. This, in turn, translates into higher frame rates. There are several ways to reduce the render time, but the more brute force and easiest way to do that is just to reduce the resolution. However, translating a lower resolution frame up to a larger display output usually leads to nasty images and some artifacting. So, by using an upscaler, the image can pass through an algorithm to better replicate the details of the original image. More performance and similar quality? Exactly how far can we take it? Why don't we just use lower and lower image resolutions? Despite what many on X have claimed, at some point that original image begins to lose detail that's needed to define the picture. You can really see this impact with finer textures in clothing material, thin objects like fencing, power lines, and even dense foliage. So, going too low can prove highly detrimental to generating a larger output image. On the inverse, though, the larger the base image is, the better the quality. Now, we might save a little bit less time, but the overall image quality is better. That's why when we're using an upscaler, quality mode typically has a scaling factor of 67% of the output monitor, balanced mode is 59%, and performance mode is 50%. Now, it is possible to go down as low as ultra performance mode, or about 33% of that original image. But on a 4K TV, that runs at about 720p. And that's exactly why people are screaming at Alan Wake 2. It only uses 864p as its internal resolution. So, here's the conundrum with determining equivalence in an upscaler. For the PS5, they have to use either in-engine or Fidelity FX Super Resolution to scale the image, which has been heavily scrutinized by the community in many instances. But if we have an AI upscaler, say NVIDIA's DLSS or PlayStation's PSSR, that AI component can have benefits that lead to a cleaner upscaled image. But from a functionality perspective, can't they both be equivalent? Just like the Apollo 13 example from the intro, just because the solution isn't the same doesn't mean that they aren't functionally equivalent. So this is going to be a bit of an experiment for us today. I've got 6 different games of varying speeds, and I'm going to be running them side by side to see if you can tell the difference. I'm not going to be pausing the screen, I'm not going to be running in slow motion, and I'm not even going to be zooming in, because that's not the way we play games. My goal isn't to show you guys where the artifacts occur, but to show you the functional effect of the upscaler. So, time to watch some gameplay. Let's roll the clip. First, we got Red Dead Redemption 2. This scene starts out pretty fast as we hop on our horse and leave the robbery. On the left, we have an AI upscaler with DLSS, and on the right, FSR with no upscaling. Galloping through Saint Denis, there is a lot of motion on the edges of the screen, while the center remains relatively stable. Pay attention to the railings, the power lines, and the fencing throughout the scene. That's where the upscaling will really have an impact. But as we slow down and get into the gunfight, those surroundings become pretty static, and the attention zooms in around John. At speed and without zooming in, the foliage looks surprisingly well on both sides, but the fencing does look a tad softer with FSR. But as a whole, both scenes look remarkably close, and even the artifacts and the effects from the explosions look pretty similar. If you watch that Digital Foundry video, Ratchet & Clank has been scrutinized for its oversharp appearance. Not only did Digital Foundry validate the issue with the developer, but I also posted on X that the sharpening on the console, it's already a non-recommended configuration. What that means is the developers are artificially making the current implementation worse than what's on the PS5 Pro. So let's do the developers' jobs. Let's update to FSR 3, decrease the sharpness to 3, and let's give it another whirl. This on-rails segment has a lot of speed, so on the outside it's already blurred and hard to focus. But Ratchet himself looks very comparable. Even then, with these close-up shots, the details between the two are consistent and functionally equivalent, at least to my eye. The Last of Us slows things down considerably, but it showcases these upscalers in heavy foliage. That rabbit darting across the scene, it does have ghosting, but it happens on both scenes. With slower camera pans, steady jogging, and a slower overall scene, both methods get plenty of time to work out the detail in the branches, the water, and the finer textures in Joel's shirt, his jeans, the jacket. Just all that work that Naughty Dog poured into the game is maintained, and it looks very good for both upscalers. I still can't get enough. Let's go back to the fast scene in F124. Ultimately, focusing on the fencing detail while we're driving across this track is quite challenging. However, one detail I did see, though not in these side-by-side clips, is there's pretty bad resolution in the rearview mirrors with FSR. Granted, when we're flying around the track at 67 kilometers per hour, you might want to focus what's going on in front of you, not in your rearview mirror. But with this hairpin turn, things look really close. FF16 is a bit different. We're running here in performance mode with an effective render resolution of 1080p. We've got all sorts of effects from dust and leaves and Garuda surprising us to shake things up. However, between the two images, the details in the bricks on the ground, the staircase, the trees in the wind, and Clive's character model look incredibly good with either upscaler. We got it in the clips with Cyberpunk 2077. Heading back into Night City, things look as expected from all of the other samples. Thanks to the 1440p internal render resolution, the power lines are resolving well, the text and the signs above the street, and ultimately, the materials and reflections of V's car look similar on both sides. Having watched all the clips, what do you guys think? When running a game in quality mode, I think DLSS and FSR are similar enough to be considered equivalent. There are instances where ghosting does occur with FSR in fast motion, which could distract some people. But if we're in that fast motion scenario, you should be focusing on something other than those finer details in the game, like the main points of the gameplay. And if we're in a slower scene, both upscalers have sufficient time to resolve the motion and present a clear gaming experience. Today, we've talked about what it takes to be an equivalent GPU for the PlayStation 5 Pro. We've showcased the three big selling points. We got the bigger GPU, the ray tracing performance, and the upscaling of the PlayStation 5 Pro, and we've compared how each of those are reflected in the GPUs with actual gameplay. So let's get the elephant out of the room and first talk about the RTX 4070. Many online have claimed that this GPU is the closest thing to an equivalent feature set compared to the PS5 Pro. Unfortunately, that feature set, like the Corvette from the intro, it leans into features that the PS5 Pro just doesn't deliver. The RTX 4070 stands out as it outperforms all of the other GPUs today, even when it's CPU bottlenecked by a console equivalent CPU. With the PS5's Pro heavy focus on RT and quality modes, the RTX 4070 is just in a completely different performance league compared to what's claimed by Mark Cerny himself. Let's not forget that the 4070 also has cool features like frame generation and popular desktop features, such as an NVMe encoder, scaled desktop video, anti-lag for reduced system latency, and all those other NVIDIA bells and whistles. Unfortunately, for all you fanboys that have been preaching this card for the past 4 weeks, its performance and feature set is far above and beyond what a PS5 Pro can offer, which is by definition not equivalent. Now for the more level-headed folks out there, let's get to brass tacks. We've got 4 alternatives that can fit a functional equivalence, but it mainly hinges on your requirement for an upscaler. Now, if you missed that part of the video, head back to this timestamp and re-watch some of the gaming clips. It might surprise you. If you agree with me that FSR is effective enough as an upscaler, both the RX 6800 and 7700 XT check all the boxes of an equivalent GPU. Both operate around the 40% performance improvement mark with rasterization, and most of the time, their RT performance is on par with NVIDIA's enhanced offerings, while still using console equivalent settings. Unfortunately, they lack the AI hardware component on the GPU, and that just might be a deal breaker for you. But for me, FSR is close enough, especially with its quality mode. So the 6800 and 7700 XT check enough boxes to be deemed equivalent. However, the star of the show has got to be the RTX 3070, and by relation, the RTX 3070 Ti. Their rasterization performance might be a bit slower than the AMD cards, but they are in the same ballpark and they fit the bill of up to 45%. However, RT performance is where the 3070s come ahead, typically besting the horsepower improvements of the AMD competition. The cherry on top is that NVIDIA's DLSS is in full effect, so AI-accelerated upscaling is available. And where the RX 6800 falls short by one checkbox, the RTX 3070 and 3070 Ti check all three, but with one huge caveat. These two cards only come equipped with 8GB of VRAM, which isn't ideal for this class of hardware. Though it didn't really impact any of the testing I've shown today, I have noticed in Final Fantasy XVI that the game would just suddenly tank performance after playing for multiple hours. Now, I expect this to be a software bug on Square's side. As I've looked at other videos on this channel, it is entirely fixable by the developer. We saw it with Hogwarts Legacy, we saw it with Callisto Protocol. Check out the video as well at the top right. So, what do you guys think? Did we settle the debate? Let me know down in the comments what you think. Now, if you see anyone posting anything about the console equivalent GPU over on Twitter, please share this video. My goal is to inform you guys about the tech that drives all of our passion, gaming. But collectively, it's our duty to spread the word to our console brothers. Though we might disagree on our preferred gaming devices, I don't want to give them false hope of overhyping their device. If you liked this video, smash the button and consider subscribing to the channel. Thanks for sticking to the end of the video. I hope you've enjoyed it. I'm going to get back to playing more Final Fantasy. See ya.